So here we are again with our watercolor lettering, and I'm going to show you how to do it in a little different method today to help it have more of this texture show through. If you followed the tutorial last time, you've already saved your artwork as a PNG file or duplicated it in your gallery. If you haven't watched that video yet, I'm going to put a link to it in the description so you can watch that first and create your base piece that you're going to use for coloring. So I duplicated my inked lettering in Procreate in my gallery. You can also pull in your PNG at this time if you have it, and also pull in this watercolor paper, which was included in the tutorial that comes prior to this one. So you'll have a free watercolor paper, the free palette, and 4 free brushes in the first tutorial. So after you go through that one and create your lettering, save it when you have it just in like the black inked version, save it as a PNG or duplicate it in your gallery, and then you're going to use it in this tutorial. And also go grab your brushes and your palette. So at this time, pull in your PNG file or grab your duplicated canvas, and we're going to start coloring it in a new method. So I have mine actually in separate layers like this because I duplicated my canvas instead of saving as a PNG. I was able to preserve layers, but if you have it all as one solid layer like this when you save as a PNG, that's totally fine too. Let's add our paper in. I saved mine as a photo. There it is. And I'm going to put that all the way to the bottom. All these layers are set to a normal blend mode right now, but what we want to do is change these ones for your lettering to color burn, because you're going to burn into the watercolor paper. So I'm going to do that now. If you have layers, change each layer that you plan to color burn. And then I'm going to create clipping masks for each one of these. You can color directly on these layers if you wanted to, but sometimes I like to change my color around. If you wanted to color directly on, you got to swipe 2 fingers to the right and turn on alpha lock, or click the menu and click alpha lock. I like to have the option to like change things around a little bit if I want to. I don't want to color directly on there, so I like to use clipping masks. So I'm going to create a layer above each of my lettering layers, and I'm going to turn those layers to clipping masks. So now we have our canvas set up. So I have my watercolor paper at the bottom. I have my first piece of lettering, or you could do your entire PNG file on top of the watercolor paper, set it to color burn, and then create a clipping mask on top of the lettering set to normal. So first I'm going to start coloring in this layer here. So what I'm going to do is grab my glaze brush, or you can use wet mop, whichever, and then I'm going to choose like a pretty blue. Since this is black, but it's not a big deal because you're clipping color down on top of it. Sometimes it's like maybe a little bit easier to see if it's switched out to white, but it's okay. I'm just going to leave it as black. So let's start coloring in our letters here. You can see how bright that is, and also how much texture is showing through from the watercolor paper below it. Try to keep it all in like one motion. Every time you lift your pen, you're going to create a darker area when you overlap. In this case, it's not like super intense or anything, but if you can do the first swipe all in one pass, then that keeps it like nice and even. And then you can go back through and do another swipe to intensify the color. So in this case, like the color is pretty bright. If you chose one of these lighter blues, you would see more clearly how color burn is a little different. So it'll come through more as like a really light glaze, and then you'll have to keep layering the color on, which I kind of like, because then you can really control how intense it's getting. So you can see how this area here, every time I pass over, it gets a little darker, but it also shows a lot of that texture from the watercolor paper, which I really like. And it's hard to get it to look like that when you use the multiply mode, which is what we did in the last tutorial. So I'm just going to kind of go over all of this lettering. That's a little darker than I want, but I'm going to show you a way to kind of like smooth it out. Just kind of like give it like some dark areas just to make it have some variation and keep it interesting. Okay, and then so for example, this layer here, this area right here, it's a little darker. Like these areas that are really black are kind of overwhelming sometimes. This isn't terrible, but it can get pretty dark the more you swipe over. So I'm going to choose this smudging tool with the same brush. So you just hold it down and it says smudge with current brush. I always just double check to make sure it actually is using the current brush, because I have some troubles with that where it doesn't actually take. And then you kind of just gently, not with a whole lot of pressure, just kind of smooth it out, and that kind of blends your color around. Like if you had wet watercolor paint on your page, you could kind of like blow it around to get it to flow into all the wet areas. And that kind of smooths it out a little bit. I don't have too many areas that I really feel like I need to smooth, so I'm just going to leave it like that, and maybe that. Okay, so I like that. If you have it all in one layer, you can continue on and start coloring your roses. I have to go up to my clipping mask because I have it in a separate layer. So now this is going to color over the flowers and the leaves. So I'm going to start with green. So just like in real life when you're using watercolors, if you layer color on top of another color, it's going to like, you can create new colors or whatever. Like if you had a yellowish color and then layered it over top of the blue, you're going to make like this pretty green. So I'm going to start with, I think I'm going to start with the green. Okay, so I did like one pass and then you kind of just tap more color in and it gets it nice and dark. You can also grab a little bit of the light blue if you want and like put that in certain areas, just like you would if you were painting, where you can dip your brush in a few different colors. That's a little dark for me. You can't really fix it by putting white. So what you need to do is just erase a little bit back out. I'm just going to turn the opacity on the eraser way down because I just want to erase a tiny bit. And of course we're erasing it back out to the black layer that we're clipped down onto, so it's going to look even darker for a second there. But I'm just going to add a little more color back in. And with one pass, it's really light. With another pass, it intensifies. So you're able to correct like little areas. Or you can use your smudging tool and kind of just like blend it, push the color around. And it kind of mimics real life watercolor where you can push the color around. So I really like that. I think that looks really pretty. I'm going to do the same to the other side. So I need my brush, my green. I'm just going to do one pass first. Of course, if you have all this in one layer, you can make your brush smaller and just be more careful around the areas you don't want to be green, but it also looks pretty when it kind of flows into each other too, just like real watercolors. So you don't have to be too particular. It's kind of part of the beauty of it. All right, I really like that. And I'm just going to work on the roses here. So I'm going to do the same thing here where I didn't really want that much green in that rose, so I'm just going to erase some of it back out and go with a little bit more pink, less green. I can leave a little bit. All right, let's work on the flowers. So that's as much color as I want to add to the flowers, and then I'll go ahead and color in these like accent lines and stuff. And I think we'll do those with the red just to make it have like a little more contrast. So So let's grab that. And then just try to use like a big brush and go over it one time, because the red gets dark really fast. So if you just go through it one time without lifting your pen, it'll keep it kind of like more of a pinkish color, and then you can go back through and just add little dabs here and there of like the darker color. Otherwise it's going to get really dark really quick. So that's pretty good. And then just some areas I'll just kind of like dab in a little bit more color. Okay, so you could totally leave it like that and be finished. And you can see how much of like the watercolor paper is showing through. It's much more than last time. So I think that looks really pretty. But I kind of want to put a background in, and I want to show you one more trick for making it look like real watercolors, where your paint has like more variation and a little bit more like really wet watercolor paint. So first I'm going to put the background in. So I'll make a layer on top of the watercolor paper. And we have to make sure we turn that to color burn. And then I'll grab this like lighter blue and just kind of layer that on. I'm going to grab the lightest blue just because I want to be able to do lots of layers to get it the darkness that I want. Okay. So I'm not too worried. I can see it's going over top of like the banner ribbon and stuff, but I'm not too worried about that right now. So something like that. And you can always go back in here and turn the opacity down so that it's not so intense, and kind of adjust it that way too once you have your color layered on there. So I'll turn it about halfway, and then I'm just going to go back in and kind of like erase a little bit out, because I don't really want it like spilling over the banner ribbon and stuff. So just kind of tap your brush and press down. It'll erase little like splotchy sections out. Something like that, it's like a little less overwhelming. And grab my alcohol brush. So this one called Alcohol Droplets. I'm going to crank it all the way up because I want like these big drops to spill on the paper. So then you can kind of just like tap your pen, and they'll, if you drag your pen around, they'll scatter, which is really pretty, and you don't have to worry so much about like placing them perfectly or whatever. It kind of is just random, and I think that looks better. So you can just like swipe your pen around, or you can tap. And if you want it to be more intense, you can turn on, I always turn off this gesture controls where your finger can draw on the screen, because I'll accidentally draw stray marks and stuff. But you could turn that on, and then it interacts a little bit differently with the painting when you use your fingertip versus your Apple Pencil. So if you want them to be precisely where you're tapping, then you can use your fingertip, and it also makes them a little bit darker. Well, I guess not darker, but just like it goes on a little bit heavier so you can see it more clearly. And if you use your pencil, it doesn't always go exactly where you're tapping. It kind of splays out and goes random. But so if you really want a lot of control over it, just use your fingertip, and it also will make it more intense. So you'll be able to see it a little better on your paper. But I'm going to turn that back off because I don't want to make stray marks everywhere. So we did our alcohol droplets, and then I want to do some salt. So you can grab your salt brush and just kind of, I put it all the way up to the max to make it just like these big pieces of salt, but you could turn it down to do fine salt, or turn it all the way up to do like coarse, like kosher salt. And just kind of tap your brush on this all over the screen, and it'll take out, it's really subtle, but it'll take out like these teeny tiny little areas, just like salt would if you sprinkled it on your wet watercolor paint and then wiped it off when it was dry. It removes, it like sucks up the paint, and then when you swipe it off, it leaves these little white speckly areas behind, and that looks really pretty. So that's pretty good. And then I'm going to leave it like this, but I want to show you one more trick. You can erase pieces out, but if you want to make it look more realistic. So what you could do is duplicate. I'm going to just do it on this layer here because it'll be most obvious. That's like most of the writing. So you could duplicate this and then erase little pieces out of one of them. And little bits out of the second one. can turn your eraser like way down, so you don't want to erase too much. And then to get it back, or to create even more of that effect, you can just keep duplicating these, and you just erase little pieces out of each one, and it makes it like really have a lot of variation there, and I think that looks pretty. So I actually I'm going to go back to what I had. But that's one way you can also do your background. If you really want it to have like a lot of variation, you could do it with your background too. So you could duplicate that, and then you can erase like little bits here. I'm just going to make sure that's way down. You don't want to erase too much. And then you can erase little bits in the next one, and you can just keep repeating that as many times as you wish, and till you get the effect you want. But the background is really dark now because I duplicated my layers, so I'm just going to turn this one back off. So that's another way to make a watercolor lettering piece where you have, if you want more of this texture to show through, you can utilize the color burn blending mode, and I think that looks really pretty. So if you've done this project, then I would love to see it. If you share it on social media, just tag me. I can be found at mymcdoodles or hashtag mymcdoodles, and then I'll be able to see your pretty art. So I'd love to see what you came up with if you create this. For more fun projects like this, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you receive notifications when there's a new video. Thanks for watching.